Hello, everybody. Welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. We've got Lee Masters on our call today, and this is going to be one of our micro episodes, which Sensasvino and I were saying were experimental, but now they're in full force and they're not experimental anymore. They're short topics. We're going to keep this to 30 minutes or less, and we'll cut it off rapidly. Sensasvino will pull the plug on this quickly. And having Sensasvino and Lee Masters on this call is one of the things that we wanted to talk about, which is firearms. We want to talk about martial military arts, technology, force multipliers. Firearms fall into that category. And I guess the topic the question I want to ask the two of you right away is what is acceptable when it comes to protecting your own life or someone that you love, someone you care deeply about, and how do you do that, or what is acceptable? Sensasvino, you got any thoughts on that before we punt it to Lee?
That's a great question. I'd like to hear Lee's answer first before I jump in, since he's our featured guest of this micro episode.
Amazing.
Thanks, Nick. Okay. So the usual reply to this would be what would be acceptable in the local law in either states or in our countries. I personally feel that if one of my family is in danger and to the point of life threatening, then there's no limit to what I'm going to respond to. In Sweden, we're not allowed to carry guns, so therefore that won't be an issue. And in Sweden and the UK are very similar, that you're not allowed to carry anything that will be used as a weapon. I've got my hands. What do I do with those? So yeah. If you ask me that question, there's no limit to the response that I'm going to give you if you threaten my family.
Yeah, and we should have mentioned that Lee is a very Makio holder in jiu-jitsu and a very ancient Japanese martial art, a very high level martial arts practitioner. So we should take all his comments on combat very seriously. Sensasvino, what do you have to say about that question?
I like thinking about it from two angles. One being what the law allows, and two, what my moral conscience allows, which is essentially the same answer as Lee provided. Is that if it comes to protecting my family or myself, and someone is offering to contribute great bodily harm or death, then there's no limit. I'm going to do whatever it takes, weapon, unweapon, to protect us, and worry about the legal consequences later. Having said that, in Michigan law, for example, you are allowed to use deadly force if you have a reasonable belief that you're in immediate danger of death or great bodily harm or sexual assault. So that is a legal defense to the charge of murder. And you're also supposed to use commensurate force, right? So if it's a gray area, if it's not clear whether that's deadly force, I'm not quite sure what that gray area is, because I think once people start doing violence to you, it's hard to know where in the moment where it's going to end. But if there's a gray area, you're not, if someone is stealing your wallet, you're not allowed to shoot them. But if someone is stealing your wallet and they make you believe that they're going to kill you immediately thereafter, now and you can shoot them. And of course, I'm an American, so I believe we should all be able to carry guns in virtually every setting. But I realize not everybody shares my extreme pioneer views.
Listen, I just want to chime in a little bit because I'm here in Canada, and we're going through this stuff where my firearms right now, government wants to confiscate them. They want to make them prohibited. They want to make them illegal. And, I just really like hunting. I like 3-gun competition. I like IPSC stuff. For me, it's a sport. It's been in the Olympics for shooting sports in the Olympics has been around forever. But on the topic of defending yourself, I have a student who we got into a great debate about this. And I said to him, and I'm going to be just super blunt about it because I think on this call we should, you come in your house and somebody's raping your daughter. and you're going to leave your house and you're going to go get in your car and call the police and just wait for them to show up. And he's like, no, I'm going to fucking kill them. And I'm like, but you don't think firearms should be legal? Like, you know, so what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to choke them to death. I'm going to smash them with a lamp. Like, he had all these. And I said, so you don't mind defending yourself and you don't mind actually inflicting grievous bodily harm on another human being. You just really care about like how it's done, right? Like, you know, you care about the tool that you're using. And yeah, I am a Canadian who is aligned with Sense of Swino. If I could carry a firearm every day for self-protection, I would. And I don't know why that would surprise anybody about a career martial artist, that they would want to be able to defend themselves, right? Like, that's pretty much what I do every day, is practice defending myself, right? And yeah. I'm a very nice person. Let me ask this next question. Lee, when's the first time you ever held a firearm and for what purpose? And then I'm going to ask you that as well, since it's, you know.
Only about 5 years ago.
Ooh.
Yeah, so not that long ago. True firearm. I've held air guns and stuff like that. I've probably done more damage with a shuriken star, to be fair. But true firearm only 5 years ago, and that was one of the reasons for that was because I wanted to find out the mechanics of a gun. I wanted to, if I had the unfortunate situation and large enough balls to actually protect myself against the gun, I wanted to be able to make it safe. And I pretty much went from there. Really, I was training with the army guys, and it went from there.
Nice. How about you, Sensei? When's the first time you touched a firearm and for what purpose?
Well, I think it's pretty common experience in you know the areas where I live for a parent to have some kind of firearm. We had a cottage in the northern parts of Michigan, and we had some pest control problems, porcupines that were eating the floorboards of the house and things like that. And so my father, who didn't have a firearm at home, went out and bought a .22 rifle. So I was 7 or 8 years old at the time, and he was going to use that to take out the porcupine, which he eventually did. But meanwhile, when he was sighting it in and getting used to it, he let me shoot it a little bit, and I was addicted from the moment I shot that first .22. It was so exciting to be able to project yourself out to 20 yards or 50 yards.
Opinion.
Right? Yeah, super fun, man. So yeah, about 6 or 7 or 8 years old.
That's what I was like 8 or 10 hunting with my dad, rabbit hunting. First firearm I ever held was a Winchester 410 shotgun. And I actually still have that Winchester 410 shotgun today.
Nice.
Still has a hammer on it, actually.
Old school.
Yeah. And then 22s. And for me, it was mostly foul hunting, just fun. And it was interesting because for me, this is the next question I want to ask the two of you. You know, today, when you pick up a firearm, how do you approach that? Like when you, like safety, why do you want to pick it up? Like, let's not say for self-defense, like what do you like about firearms, like on the sporting side of things? How do you approach that? How do you pick it up? What's your favorite one? Like, Lee, you got a favorite model, and how do you approach that?
So I've chosen the Glock 17. That's what I use both in normal training and also in IPSC tournaments. I went for that particular model because most military guys and police personnel use that. So I wanted to get used to that because of teaching these guys. I pretty much go the same way as you would with any martial arts weapon, really. You know, you have your SOP, your standard operational procedure of safety and everything else. And don't take any risks. You know, if I pick up a new live blade, for example, I will always get to feel it. You know, this is one of the things that I've said to my students many a time. If you're going to use a weapon, you have to practice with it, whether it's your hand, whether it's a bow staff, whether it's whatever. And you have to become accustomed to that weapon, and it then becomes, as we all know, it becomes an extension of our hands and our mind. So that's the way I look at it.
How about you, Sensei Serino? Did you understand my strange question?
Yeah, I think so. As you know, in the world of pistols, I'm kind of a SIG fan. Just turned to them a few years ago, and because I'm so familiar with the platform, and I've got a really good armorer, so I can send out a SIG that's a stock SIG and send it to this guy, and it comes back much better than it would be with stock, right? With a lot of work done on it, better triggers, better springs. So I'm very comfortable with them. I use them all the time. I really agree with Lee with what you just said about SOP. You know, there has to be a routine with a weapon like that, a projectile weapon. Even if you know it very, very well, you still have to go through a few steps to make sure that, you know, in firearms, right, you have to never point the muzzle at anything or anybody you don't wish to destroy. You want to clear the weapon. You want to make sure all the parts are functional. You want to do a visual inspection to make sure that there's no obvious, you know, breaks or weaknesses in the system. And then having done that, you know, you want to make sure your eyes and ears are protected, and that you understand where your range is and what's beyond your range and what's behind you and what's on the side of you. But you have a kata, right? You have a kind of a kata with that. And if you work through the kata with the consciousness, it can be very safe, and it makes it's like the bow-in ritual in a martial arts class, right? By the time you get through your kata, you're in a much better place to be doing the thing you're doing.
I was just going to say, that's exactly the same with a katana as well, right? So the control of the katana, when you move it from A to B, you know, I've only been saying this recently to my children, that what happens is the SOP, as time goes on, becomes a bit of a ritual, maybe even formed into some kind of mythology and everything else. But the reality is, it starts practical and maybe then gets a little bit watered down.
Yeah, I like that. I like the kata. I like what you just said, Lee. I like that thought of that. You know, for me, it's very ritualistic. Like if I was going to hand one of you a firearm, I would hand it always the exact same way. It would be the clip would be out, it would be racked, it would be locked, and it would be handed to you in a very specific way that the barrel would never be pointed at you. You know, if I walked into the next office over and there was a handgun on the ground, I would pick it up exactly the same way. I would clear it. I would point it in a safe direction. I would empty it. I would do everything the same way. The one thing I want to just add to what we've said is the first time I ever held a handgun, it wasn't the same when I was hunting because I was a little kid and I was just super excited about it. But when I got into pistols, it was the consequence of mistake, right? Like that was really high in my mind. And it's the same, like I think for a katana, like I say this in my Iaido classes. If you're in karate or judo or jujitsu, you break somebody's arm or you knock them unconscious, you can say sorry after. They're going to come back from that. But if you get a live blade and their arm falls off, it's really hard to say sorry, right? Or you accidentally unchamber a round into their leg or their shoulder or somebody somewhere worse. And we know somebody who that's happened to. You know, so it's the consequence for me. Like that's what makes me do my kata very seriously with a firearm, is the consequence of mistakes, right? Sensei Serino,
this is one of the things that I...
Go ahead, Lee. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. What I was going to say is that's one of the things that I had to do with my Menkyo Kaidan grading, is that the Bokken became a Shinken. And I was then doing defenses with a Jutei against the Shinken. So then all of a sudden, your level of, let's say, attention becomes majorly heightened. And just like you just said, basically, yeah.
Right. Yeah, if you punch somebody in the face, they're probably going to be okay in the long run. If you ventilate their chest and head, they're probably not coming back from that. So, yeah. Where do you want? I just want to give you a chance if you want to take this in a direction or you have thoughts. And yeah.
Well, yeah. So that reminds me, you know, in Kyudo, right? You have the moment hanare, right? The moment you release. In Iaido, it's right, the sayabiki, and the hanare again, the separation of the saya and the sword. And to me, the mindset walking around on the streets unweaponed is relaxed, big picture, not martial. But when I go through that ritual, getting myself ready to handle a pistol, or when I'm getting ready to handle a sword, there's a right. You kind of go into this moment, you come out in a different place. You've got a heightened level of awareness. I remember, Randy, the last time you and I shot together at a range in town here, and we were in bays next to each other, and I remember glancing over at you and Christine while I was in the other bay. And as I was going through my ritual, I was thinking about my breathing, right? I deliberately slow my breathing down, trying to change my focus a little bit. I'm in a very different place because of those consequences, right? Like, you're now living in that place. You know, I'm sitting at home with a scotch. That's not where my mindset is, right? But when I'm going through that process, right, now I'm going to be for 30 minutes or an hour, I'm going to be in that heightened state of awareness. And for me, the breathing, the kata is really a big part of that. And I think as experienced martial artists, we probably all have a means of getting to that place, and firearms is one of the places where we can practice that.
I was going to say, so in osteopathy, we have this expression called still point, and what Nick was just saying there about getting to the point of release just before. It's exactly the same as before the person, if they are attacking in jiu-jitsu, you have this still point, this void, if you like. And one of the things that I teach my students is exactly the same. So you have this focus. We have an expression in Tenjin Shinryu that's it's the 3 Ks, and it's Kime, Kyokyu, and Kame. And then when all those 3 are together, then that's when you've got that, again, still point. So the Kime will be like Ishin, Isho. So basically one mind, one heart and mind, which is also mind and body. And then one place. So you're in that place, you're directing your focus to that place.
Yeah, I love that. You know, for me, since it's, you know, the heightened awareness comes the moment I put the key into the gun cabinet. Right? Like, as soon as I make the decision that I'm going to get firearms out of their safe place to go and transition to another place, I become very hyper-focused, very hyper-aware. As I'm walking down the stairs, who's around me, where are things, do I have everything in order? Do I have, in Canada, you have to have an authorization to transport. You have to have all the paperwork with the firearm, like, you know, or it's a felon here in this country. It's a felon. Like, if they pull you over and you don't have your authorization to transport and you don't have your ownership of that firearm, you can go to jail for 10 years in this country for that. Like, that's a serious crime. So when I'm unlocking the door, like I'm going through that kata, that checklist, and things are getting very heightened. Even when it's interesting when I'm driving my car, somebody cuts you off. Like, I'm way less likely to like be beeping at them and flipping them off, because I don't want police pulling me over with a trunk full of firearms and they say, where are you going? I'm going to the firearms range. Like, you know, it's just not a situation I want to get myself in. On that singular focus, Lee, I find that shooting a firearm in a tactical way is the same as when I do jukumite, say, for fighting. Your mind just shuts off. Like, it's no longer, there's no thoughts happening. You're just, and so it's funny how, like, when you're doing this, like the take up on the trigger, the stuff, you don't think about it. Like, years ago, I used to think about it, and now it just happens unconsciously. And I just go to that place where my eyes are just on the spot, like, and that's it. Yeah. And sometimes it feels like I'm actually willing the projectile to go where I want it to. And I guess I am, like, in a way, I'm willing it to go where I want it to go. I still want to be able to curve the bullet around a corner. But
when it goes back to you, you want to worry.
That's right. Yeah, the boomerang bullet, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So isn't it, by the way, I have this very intense experience when I hunt big game, you know, at 200, 300, 400 yards with a precision rifle shooting an elk or a deer. To me, that connection is very real. It feels like you're not shooting at them. It feels like you're connected with them. It's a very intense experience. But I'd love, Lee, to hear what you have to say about this idea of, like, you know, firearms being an extension of that kind of training. It takes all the training we do in the martial arts setting, and it seems to amplify a lot of the aspects of it. What do you, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the principles that we learn as in within martial arts, and I think maybe the classical martial arts more so as well, because at the end of the day, they were military arts. So you just apply those same principles, the concepts that you had. For me, I went from hand-to-hand combat to knife. You know, we're English, we like stabbing people over here, so you get to learn that. A little bit of stick, so you get that distance, and now the pistol. And the pistol to me is actually more, from a practical point of view as well, it just makes more sense for me. It would be a bit like having a short stick within the home environment, being the practicality of moving around and everything else, you know. And I think, yeah, no, as I say, what I say about the KKK scenario, which is not, I have to be careful over there, right? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Is that it just goes in, you know. I was talking to one of the guys who's a special forces guy, and I was showing him the transition from kneeling posture up into a standing posture that we use in Tenjin Shinryu. And you have the Chushin principle, keeping the center line. You have the fact that you're also keeping the gravity, so your hara. And I'm then showing them with body protection on, maybe even just a rucksack on. If you start leaning forward, you lose your center of gravity. You go off target. You're not gonna hit anything. So, yeah, that's the way I see things anyway.
I think you're right, Lee. Especially with what we bring from martial arts into this other martial art, like firearms is a martial art in my mind. And Sensei Suino and I were recently in Wyoming on the side of a mountain, and obviously we had to have a firearm with us because of the chance of grizzly bears, right? Like, you know, and it was very interesting that Sensei Suino and I are very comfortable around firearms. One of the other people also, but two of them, no, like never really even held a firearm, never shot one. And it was very interesting to see this really high level swordsman, like super high level, one of the highest level people, hold a firearm for the first time and be able to just dial it in and focus and go 2 shots, bang, bang, within millimeters of each other, never having ever at about like 30 yards, right? Like, which I was like, that's cool, man. All martial artists should feel comfortable learning how to use firearms, because, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's a great philosophical point. As a martial artist, you want to be able to protect yourself. And Lee, you said you'd be interested, you know, you picked up a firearm because you wanted to know what to do with it if you encountered one, whether that's just dealing with a firearm on the table or having to defend yourself against it. And I make that point to my students all the time. It's part of it's a spectrum of force. You should be comfortable on that level too, even if you're not a gun fanatic, even if you don't believe people should run around with them. If you're serious about self-defense and serious about extending your martial arts skills, you ought to be familiar with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I even say that to police personnel in the UK, that when police personnel should know at least make a firearm safe. Because if they go into a place, you know, they're armed with an ass, maybe if you're lucky, a taser. If there's a gun on the side, what are they going to do? The actual SOP for that is to phone for the firearms unit to come in.
What?
So again, exactly. So, you know, you're then waiting again 30 minutes for these guys to come walking in, go, yeah, take the magazine out, take the chamber. I go, yeah, that's fine now. See ya.
Right. Unbelievable. That's too much specialization in that police union.
You know,
Absolutely.
one thing I often think about is that oftentimes when I question people who are afraid of firearms, which I think fear of firearms is one of the, and lack of knowledge of firearms is one of the main reasons why, you know, these weird laws get put in place and these weird thoughts start to develop. It's just because you're just afraid. Like, it's not, you don't really have any knowledge and you're just fearful of something. And oftentimes what I will say to them is, think of the nicest human being you've ever thought of, like ever, like Gandhi, Mother Teresa. Like, I mean, go through the list and think about if they really were very knowledgeable about firearms and they were the exact same person. Would you be more afraid of them just because, would they not be the same nice person they like, or does inherently the fact that you want to defend yourself, like every living thing on the face of the earth wants to do? Like, if you corner a field mouse, it's going to defend itself with what it has. You know, does that make you an evil person or a bad person? Just because you want to be able to defend yourself. And if we took that to the point of, like, let's say a lady who's like 115 pounds, or a younger person who's like that person in the United States, that young person in the United States in that mall who just took care of business, like in a really bad situation. But force multipliers serve a purpose for somebody who needs to defend themselves, especially when you're in a deficit. And you can find yourself in a deficit, a life-threatening deficit.
Always. You know, the thing is when you're walking around, it's like it's a foregone conclusion. There's going to be someone somewhere that wants to try and do you harm, and equally, who's better than you? Unless you're switched on and see these people from a distance, you know. I'm interested that you said about Mother Teresa, because apparently there's stories of her being a bit of a bit nasty. So, like, don't judge the book by its cover there, Randy.
Yeah, you know my point though, Lee, right? Is that, you know, if you're a great person, you're a great person. If you're not a person that anybody needs to fear, then you don't need to fear them if they have a katana or a pistol or a knife or a stick. They're still the same nice person, right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't change.
Yeah, they're not going to use it with bad intent.
Right.
There you go.
So we have just under 2 minutes left. So I'll share my final thought, which is kind of the flip side of this. So I have a lot of friends in law enforcement in this area, and many of them are quite good with firearms, but not all of them are good with hand-to-hand, right? And the realization they've had in the last 5 years or so is that there are so many people out there, including bad people, who are actually pretty skilled at things like BJJ these days, right? Because it's such a widespread hobby that a lot of these guys that spend all their time getting really good at firearms are now going, wait a minute, I better get back in the gym. I better make sure I'm fit. I better make sure I understand BJJ, because that next guy I pull over might take me down. And now I got other problems, right? So it's the flip side of this equation we're talking about, which has coming from martial arts, we get into firearms, and that really anybody that's in the force spectrum anywhere ought to have a broad understanding.
Yeah, I think you're right. The broad understanding is the key.
Yeah. So let's wrap it up. Maybe Randy, offer your thoughts. Let's hear from Lee, and then Randy, you want to put a capstone on this?
Yeah. Sorry, are we going to go to Lee first?
Up to you, man.
What thoughts do you have, Lee, or what final thoughts do you want to provide?
No, I was just going to say that one of the reasons why jiu-jitsu exists is because of you've already got rid of all your weapons. So, you know, the reliance on one weapon is never a good thing. Reliance on jiu-jitsu is never a good thing, right? Reliance on anything is never a good thing. That's it.
So I guess a final thought I want to give is knowledge and training supersedes like if you're a good person and you're knowledgeable and you're trained, people don't need to fear that. Oftentimes I think a uniform provides a false sense of security. Like, I don't know what it's like in other countries, but here in Canada, the way to qualify for some municipalities for their law enforcement officers to carry a firearm is like so basic that they shouldn't have a firearm. But, you know, just by the nature of their job and what they're doing, there's this false sense of security by the public. Whereas other people, I'm like, look, man, if you're Mangala, I don't care if you're splitting atoms in your basement. You're the most qualified person to do it, right? Like you're, well, he's a horrible human being, but but anyway, you get my point, right? With knowledge and training equals safety, and so that's, I guess, kind of my final thoughts on that. Since Sooner, do you want to provide some final thoughts before we wrap this?
No, this is good. These are supposed to be short, so we got in there. We can always wade in again in more depth some other time, but I think we shared some valuable insights, and hopefully people enjoy this.
Lee, is your dad good? That's a final question. Can you please say hi to him for us?
I will do. He's next door. I'm at the clinic, so he's next door at the moment.
Please
I will do.
Send our respect to him and tell him hello for us. And yeah, so I guess my final thing I want to say is we're really trying to move Punch Kick Choke Chat in a new direction now, and we're trying to make it more professional and better branded. We're pretty well known out there now. We're getting well known in the martial arts community globally. We've got a new website, punchkickchokechat.com. Please go find that. Go on our Instagram, go on our Facebook. Please subscribe if you want to. The next level would be if you want to share it or pass it along to somebody that you think would value listening to these types of topics with us. And yeah, I know, since you know the last time you gave a final thought, I'd like you to give the same one if you can remember what that is.
Nope.
If you go on our website, there's now a place where you could suggest topics or you could suggest guests to us that you think, you know, here's a topic we really want you guys to talk about, or here's a guest that we really want you to talk to, and then we'd be happy to.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Have a great day.